You're not just tired. And I know that phrase sounds simple, but I do need to start there because for a long time, that's exactly what I kept telling myself. I'm just tired. I just need a day off. I just need to catch up on sleep. I just need to get through this week. And I kept saying that right up until I could feel really clearly that what was happening wasn't normal tired anymore. Because normal tired passes, burnout doesn't. And that's the difference. When I was burned out, rest didn't fix anything. Sleep definitely didn't do what it was supposed to do. Stopping didn't feel like stopping. I could sit down and still feel like my whole system was running. I could lie down and still feel internally on high alert. So my body looked still, but nothing in me actually felt like it was at rest. And that was one of the first things I really had to admit to myself. Because I wasn't just tired, I was under constant strain. And that realization really changed everything for me. Because tired says, yeah, push through this and then sleep later. Strain says something's off. And if you keep overriding it, this gets more and more costly. And that's exactly what burnout felt like to me. Like I was getting more and more expensive to actually run. And that line is the closest thing I've ever really found to what burnout really feels like. Because from the outside, I could still look fine for a while. I could still answer people, I could still function, still get things done, still show up the way people expected me to. And that's what makes burnout so dangerous. You can look completely functional long after it stops feeling functional on the inside. So if you've been telling yourself, yeah, you're just tired, but something in you knows that that's not the whole truth, stay with me. Because I want to tell you what I had to learn before my body forced that lesson on me. I used to think burnout meant I was doing too much and not resting enough. And yeah, that can be a big part of it. But that's not what explained my experience. Because I had moments where I slowed down, moments where I pulled back, and technically where I really rested. And still, I didn't feel like I was actually coming back online. And that confused me for a long time because I thought, if I'm resting, then why do I still feel like this? Why am I continuously exhausted? What I eventually realized is that burnout was not just about opting out. It was about strain. And more specifically, how long I had been living under strain without really even acknowledging it. See, that was the real issue. And once I realized that, a lot of things made sense really quickly. Because effort and strain are not the same thing. Like I can work hard and still feel really solid. I can do a lot and still feel clear. I can carry real responsibility and still feel like myself inside of it. But strain, that feels completely different. Strain feels more like friction. It feels like I'm tight before the day even starts, or I'm pushing from a contracted place. It feels like I'm overriding signals I should be listening to and using force where there should just be capacity. And that's where burnout started for me. Not with intensity, with sustained internal friction. That is the part I wish I'd understood a lot earlier. See, the hardest part is it doesn't begin dramatically. It was subtle. That's why I missed it for a long time. Yeah, I'd wake up tired, but not in a normal way. See, I would sleep and never feel fully restored. My mind would already be moving before I was even fully within the day. My patience got thinner, my body felt tighter, and just even simple things started feeling heavier than they should have. Nothing about it looked extreme enough to really justify concern, so I normalized it. And that's how burnout hides, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Not because it's invisible, because it arrives gradually enough that you justify it away in real time. And that's what I did. I told myself, I just need one good night of sleep. I'd tell myself I just need to get through the week and everything will be better. I'd tell myself I was being dramatic. I needed to be stronger and I can recover later. But later just keeps moving. It just keeps moving further and further away. And meanwhile, my system stays fully braced. That's the part I understand now. I thought I was tired. But really, I was living in a state where my body never got a clean signal that it was safe to come down. So even when I rested, I didn't reset. And that is a brutal place to live from. You stop moving, but you never soften. You can pause, but your body you just don't settle. Now here's the tricky part, because it isn't like just one big event. It comes from accumulation. It was, the pace, the pressure, the internal load, what I was carrying for other people, what I was not saying, what I was forcing, and what I was continuing to do even when something deeper in me was already saying, this is too much like this. That last part is the most important trigger point, because sometimes it's not just that you're doing too much. It really is because you got used to the way you're living, and it started creating constant friction inside you without you being aware of it consciously. And once that happens, everything starts to cost more. For me, even normal responsibilities started feeling expensive and quickly became too much. Not because I was lazy, weak, or that I had suddenly lost resilience, but because my whole system was already under tension. So every demand got placed on something that was already tight. It was what made everything feel heavier. And that's what made small things feel disproportionately difficult. This made me realize burnout is cumulative. It's not always one dramatic collapse. Sometimes it's 1,000 quiet overrides. Now, I also had to be honest about the ways I was coping, because most of what I was doing was not helping me recover. It was helping me stay disconnected. Right? I was tired, so the easy pick for me was more caffeine, more stimulation, more scrolling, more pushing, more just get through the day, or even worse, pretending I was okay because I didn't want to deal with what it meant if I wasn't. And that is a painful thing to admit because it was true. I was not recovering. I was propping myself up. And that only works for so long. Eventually, the signs just got louder and louder. My attention got thinner, my patience got shorter, and my body felt more contracted. Everything felt more like effort. Even things I cared about started feeling like one more demand. That was a big moment for me because when things you normally love start feeling heavy, you have to stop and tell the truth. Something is off. And if you don't understand what's happening, you begin to make it personal. And that's what I did. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was getting weaker or I should be handling this better than this. But looking back, that was not the truth. The truth was that my system had been carrying too much strain for just too long. And I kept expecting performance from a system that was asking for relief. What actually started changing things for me was not some dramatic recovery plan. It started earlier and simpler than that. It started when I stopped waiting until I was completely wrecked to take myself seriously. That small shift started to change everything. Because what I needed was not better recovery after full depletion. What I needed was to get better at noticing strain earlier. And that became the real work. Earlier. Not when I was already done, overwhelmed, or when I was already snapping, shutting down, exhausted, or numb. Just earlier. Right? The moment my body started to tighten. The moment my breathing changed. The moment my mind started speeding up. The moment everything started feeling just slightly heavier than it should. That moment is what became important. Because that was usually the moment I would ignore myself and keep pushing. And that is exactly how strain accumulates. So one of the biggest things that helped me was learning to catch the state sooner. Not later, just sooner. The first thing that genuinely helped me was changing the language. I stopped saying, I'm tired, and started saying, I'm under strain right now. And that sounds small, but for me, it was a major shift because when I called it tired, I treated myself like a machine. Keep going, get through, sleep later. But when I called it strain, I started responding differently. I got more honest with myself and became a lot more specific and more careful. I stopped acting like the answer was always to override myself. And I started recognizing that my system was giving me information and not failing me. And that really helped a lot. The second thing that helped me was reducing input fast. Not forever, just enough to stop feeding the state. Because when I'm under strain, the worst thing I can do is keep piling more onto the system. More tabs, more noise, more decisions, stimulation, conversations, pressure, things to track. I used to just keep adding. Now I know when strain is high, input has to come down, even briefly, even if it's imperfectly. That shift alone can stop the spiral from deepening. And the third thing that worked for me was this. I stopped trying to fix myself in the moment. And that sounds small, but it's huge because one thing I used to do all the time was notice that I was dysregulated, overwhelmed, tight, or exhausted. And then immediately start mentally attacking the state. It's like, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? I don't have time for this. I need to get it together. Come on, push through. And that just made everything worse because now I wasn't just strained, I was straining against the fact that I was strained. And that adds another whole layer. So what worked better was much simpler. I began to notice it, I named it, and I stopped adding more. Right? That is the move. Simple, and it's an effective move. Right? So it's not to fix it instantly or thinking your way out of it. Don't perform okay. Just stop piling more on top. And that creates space. And in that space, things can start settling on their own. Another thing that worked for me was breath work. And I don't mean it as a performance or as some perfect routine, right? You're not trying to become a different person in 60 seconds. Just as a signal to your subconscious or your underlying safety system to just slow down, right? So with the breath work, what I would do is just take an inhale for 5 seconds, and then a long exhale for 8 seconds with a brief 2-second pause. And I don't want you to actually count it out. Just make the inhale shorter than the exhale with a brief pause. And in that pause, I call it the still point. But really all you want to do is just not think. Just drop into it. You exhale and then just release everything. Just no thoughts, no sensation, just drop into it for 2 seconds. And then do that for a few rounds. And that's it. Now that helped because it gave my body one clean message. You don't have to stay this activated right now. When I was in burnout, I underestimated how much I needed simple, direct signals like that. I didn't need more theory, definitely didn't need more self-judgment or even more optimization. Just something that told my system to come down just one notch. Sometimes that one notch had a profound impact. And then I had to change the way I moved through the day because I couldn't just keep going back into the life the exact same way and expect a different outcome. That was one of the hardest truths that I actually had to face. Because what worked for me was going back in differently. Sometimes just a little slower, a little cleaner, one thing at a time with just a little less force, less stacking, less pretending I had more capacity than I actually had. Because burnout for me was not caused by doing things. It was caused by continuing to do things when the strain was already stacked too high. And that's actually very different because once I understand that, the goal stopped being do less forever, right? The goal now became stop piling more strain onto a system that's already asking for less. And to me, that felt real. It felt workable, like something I could actually live. And the truth is, the earlier I caught it, the less dramatic the recovery needed to be. That is something I believe very deeply now. You don't wait for the collapse to tell you the truth. You catch the truth while it's still quiet, while it's still workable, while your body's still asking instead of forcing. Because if you ignore strain long enough, eventually the body stops asking nicely. It makes a decision for you. And that is what people call burnout. But for me, burnout started long before the crash. The crash was just the point where I could no longer keep negotiating with reality. So if you're in this right now, this is really important for you to hear. You're not weak, and you're not broken, and you're not failing at life. You may just be carrying more strain than your system can keep holding without a consequence. And that is different. And that difference is so important. Because when you understand that, you stop making your exhaustion into a character flaw, and you start meeting it as information. That's where things began to change for me. Not when I judged myself harder, when I got more honest sooner. So this is the shift I would leave you with. Pay attention to where strain shows up first. For me, it was in tightness, in speed, in internal pressure, in the feeling that everything suddenly costs more than it should. And for you, it might be your breathing, your body, your focus, your patience, the pace of your thoughts. Learn your early signs. That is your doorway. Because once you can catch the strain early, you have options. And that is what helped me the most in the end. Catching it earlier and not carrying it longer than I needed to. And that changed more than I can explain. Thank you.